All right, so here's another video about some of the, all-time great triple triad players. Per usual, this is my unhumble opinion. This is the remaining players in the Terrific 12. This is going to be mostly tournament-based, so apologies to closed players, to trade players. Some players mentioned here I think were very good trade players and deserve additional credit for that, or good closed players. There's lots of forms of the game that were played competitively. I'm focused here on tournaments. It's what I have the records for. And yeah, so this video, I made a video about Sujiro as one member of the terrific 12. Those players that aren't quite in the GOAT conversation, but are definitely in that next tier, are just very, very strong players. And at certain times in history, some of them certainly were in their GOAT conversations. I just think they don't have a case with the entire history of the site. They're all incredible players. I'd love to make videos about each of them, but I get lazy. So I made videos for each of the 5 players I think have a serious case to be GOAT, and these players aren't quite there. They're pretty close, and I think you could certainly argue some of them are as good as some of the players in the GOAT conversation. I just don't think they have a case for number 1. So I'm going to go through them chronologically, so starting with the player that joined the site first and going from there. At the end, I'll do some comparisons. I'm going to try to rank them. You're going to disagree with my rankings. I'm going to disagree with my rankings. I don't know exactly what I put. It was whatever I was in the mood for yesterday, and my mental rankings keep changing. So here we go. First, we have Otto Kazi, also known as Kamikaze. So he won 2 tournaments. He won the third site championship and held on to it for the second longest anyone ever did until TTA 6, when Scythe won it from him, which is very suspicious, but we'll get to that in a moment. And he won Squall 5 years later, which is a pretty big gap for tournament winning and a pretty impressive gap. He also won what I believe was the first Triple Triad Network tournament ever in, that's a typo, it should be Price of Courage 1. And he was just a fantastic clan leader, led his clans to enormous success. Zodiac Braves under him won Clan League 3 and both Clan Wars 3 and 4. And then, again, this 5-year later period, he then leads Paradigm Shift to win Clan Wars 8. I think he was the best player of 2005. I made a video of who I think the best player was in every year of the site's history. And he was the winner in 2005. Again, 2005, 2010, those were his big years. And he is sometimes alleged to be having an affair with Scythe. So, let's go to a few more accomplishments of his, and then I'll talk a bit about his without reading from a page. I believe he's the only player other than Doc Evil to earn 3 consecutive icons in his first 3 tournaments. He hit the ground running. The first 3 tournaments of the site, he had 3 quarterfinals, or like the second through 4th, he might have missed the first one. Whatever. Just immediately winning icons just right and left. In TTAC specifically, he won a championship there. He defended his title multiple times. He has the second highest win rate of anyone ever. I think his run to win Squall in 2010 is the second best 6-round tournament run ever. There's one by Seto I think is even better, and I think is the greatest tournament ever won. But I probably think Squall is the second best tournament ever won. He beat Vid, who later won a tournament. He beat Turds, who previously won a tournament. He beat Great Sephiroth, who had won 3 tournaments. He beat Focus, who was a very solid player. He beat MC and was up, who, many tournaments won among this crowd. Very strong players. He's 2-0 versus was up me, which is his best record against any other, top player. One of them was the first tournament I ever played, but one of them was the Squall Finals, and he absolutely crushed me there. From his tournament dominance to his clan leadership to being the main person running Elysium Fields for the time that lasted, to his significant contributions to Occult Fan, to making both the FF12 and FF13 decks for the site, and being the one to institute the ranking system where you were ranked like Sorceress, Moogle, I'm not going to remember the others, Chocobo, etc. That was Kamikaze. And I think if you add that all up, there's no way he's not a top 5 most important person in a Triple Triad Advanced history. I think it's Dalamar and Balls, and then Kamikaze and Kaus in some order, and then I'm not sure who 5th is, and I'm sure I'm missing someone obvious, but he's just got to be so high up there. So just tremendous contributions all around. Just what an incredibly important and meaningful person to the site. On his style, I didn't play him a lot, so I had the 2 games in tournaments, but the first one I wasn't any good yet and didn't understand what was happening. The second one I was good and he crushed me, and I also didn't understand what was happening. I played him sometimes outside of the main tournaments, and I had good results against him there, but I don't remember those games either. I think he leans slightly towards the aggressive side, maybe in an MC type way, which always gave me trouble, where it's not it's not always super smooth. There's a comfort in just overpowering and calculating out and seeing there's not going to be a combo problem at the end. I'll be fine. I think he was pretty good at that, but maybe I'm remembering wrong. So I don't have a feel for his style of play, but I think he's kind of interesting in that there are a bunch of players, like Cookie is one, and Cookie is one that really could have been in this video, and I decided against it. But Cookie, tremendously impressive player from about 2004 to 2007, and then just dropped off and was a 50% or below player for the rest of his time, or around 50%. He had some good runs after, but Kamikaze wasn't like that. There were players that showed up early and then didn't show up later. And there were players that weren't that good early and got better and did show up later. But Kamikaze was someone who was incredibly good in 2005 and 6. And 4. Just a phenomenal player then. And then kind of took it easy for a few years, though was still very much around and playing at a reasonable level. And then in 2010 is this big comeback and goes on to win what I'm calling the second best tournament ever. And I think being able to prove that you're dominant against different eras of player is really meaningful and really impressive. And so I think Kamikaze really has, just across the board at every part of Triple Triad, from like card design to building organizational structures to playing the game, he has such an impressive resume. And I don't think he has a case to be the best player ever, but damn, did he do a lot of good stuff. So then we have Kona, or Kona, or Koner. I keep being corrected when I pronounce it wrong. I'm going to go with Koner today, and we're going to hope that the Brits don't yell at me. So, King of Icons. He won both Rhinoa 2 and Triad Wars 11. Oh, I've tried to put pictures in, so this is somewhat more visually appealing than my normal video. Either like, what do I remember your avatar being, or if I read articles about you, what did you say your interests were, or just something I found funny or interesting from interviews or whatever. So winner of Rhinoa 2, and then significantly later Triad Wars 11. I think there's a 4 or 5 year gap there as well. Also just incredible clan performances. Winner of 4 clan leagues as co-leader of Boss, and one with Card Club in the midst of that for 5 consecutive years winning clan league, as well as 2 clan wars. And I might be missing something. My records here aren't great. So just this absurd run in clan tournaments, like to win 5 clan leagues in a row, including on multiple teams, just absolutely nuts. I don't think anyone is close to that rate. I think the next highest is 3 in a row. I think 2008, as I talked about in my best player of each year, is probably the most like interestingly competitive year in the site's history, and I think he was the second best player of that year, which is real feat in a year of like Delial's peak, Seto, Kaus Debonair having a tremendous year, becoming the first player to win 4 icons, Turds winning Vincent and tying for the Player of the Year vote, and there are a bunch of others who are in there. Great Sephiroth was really good. There's just 2008 is a really, really strong year, and Kana had, competed very well against that group. Of anyone in this group, meaning the people I'm calling kind of the 6th to 12th of all time, Koner has the most icons, and of anyone in the site's history, held the icon record for a number of years, eventually passed by Yojimbo and Delial after Koner started playing less. But he was just so good at racking up these quarterfinal finishes. And I should have had the chart, but it's just like quarterfinal, 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 something else, quarterfinal, quarterfinal, something else. And he ends up, I don't think I have this in a chart somewhere, but he ends up getting at least a quarterfinals in 57% of his tournaments, which is just a crazy high number. There were only 3 people higher, and a bunch of them played for less time, so really only Yojimbo is near that number of anyone who played for a comparable length of time. Just absolutely absurd icon rate. It is kind of interesting, though, because he really dropped off. Like, he has so many quarterfinal finishes and a few semifinals and a couple wins, But really, if you compare kind of his results and who he was beating pre-quarterfinals to after the quarterfinals, there's a slightly weird divide. It's not as drastic as I first thought it was, because if you look at the players, he hits a lot of really phenomenal opponents once he gets to the quarterfinals. But I do think there's a clear drop-off there that's sort of curious. He's also the third all-time in tournament match wins behind Yojimbo and Delial. And he has a 3-2 record head-to-head against Delial, which, for my money is worth a hell of a lot. So Koner, really phenomenal player, just so good at just every tournament coming in and being a threat, and just going deep so reliably. On playstyle stuff, I think he veered towards the aggressive side, but in a smoother, which doesn't necessarily mean better way than Kamikaze. I remember when I was starting to get good and I would watch players and kind of predict moves and really try to engage so that I could learn something from it, where I'd think, here's what I'd do. And then I'd see what they did and I'd compare. Koner was the player that I found made moves I had expected more than any other top player. And I was somewhat on the aggressive side of things at that point in time. And so I think, and partially it was because I was playing players like Koner and Delial, and Turds. But I think that's to say, it can sound like criticism to say you think someone's really good at making kind of normal moves, but consistently finding, like, there's a reason moves are normal, or that I, a good player, consider moves normal, is that they're very good moves, and he was just very good at playing, I think, a sort of aggressively tilted and interactive. He's not, in my experience or my memory of it, he's not so often meeting a corner with an opposite corner. He's meeting it with something more interactive. But just these really strong, well understood, standard in a sense, kind of play, and just maintaining that at a really high level for a long time. So Koner is our second in this group, just another tremendous player. Will it go to the next slide? This is the mystery. There we go. So our third in this group, coming a bit later, Kamikaze was very much basically from the start of the site and had played on previous sites. Koner came in, I think, in 2006, maybe late 2005, and Great Sephiroth is more late 2006 or early mid-2007. But Great Sephiroth was known as the supercomputer. He played so fast and so well. And there are players who played really fast. I always pronounce this name wrong. I'm just going to go with Fewer, and you can hate me in the comments. But, I think Fewer had a really good feel for the game and just couldn't be bothered to calculate. So he played really quickly, and he has some fantastic wins. He's one of the players with the most wins versus elite players, despite not being a tournament winner himself or having made a finals. He was a real threat to really good players because he had this really good understanding and feel for the game. But he did not calculate, and he just blew positions, or he did not calculate near as much as comparable strength players. And Great Sephiroth also played really fast. Almost certainly the best 2-minute player of all time, which is the fastest time control. And I think he was such a fast player that it felt like he must be someone not calculating. And instead, his calculation was just so tremendously fast that he could move that quickly while calculating almost everything. And that made him a just absurdly good player, especially in faster time controls, because he can calculate everything and you just don't have time to. And he ended up winning Rhinoa 3, Sid, and the 8th Site Championships. He also won a TTN tournament and is probably the 4th best player in TTN history. I think Delial, Turds, and Vid are clear 1, 2, 3, and then he's 4th. He won 2 clan leagues with Boss, and he won a clan wars with T3. He was, I think, the 3rd best player of 2008, that incredible year, and the 2nd best of 2010, which was also a really strong year. I think the even years end up being very competitive as a random artifact and coincidence of Triple Triad history, but when you see someone doing really well in the even years, think that was very competitive. He's the 4th person ever to win 3 majors after Delial was up in Seto, and only narrowly after them, and he started playing a lot later than Delial and Seto and got there shortly, within a year of either of them. So just really, really dominant player. He has a 3-1 record versus Yojimbo, which is the 2nd best of anyone ever. He has a 2-0 record versus Nightwish. His main problem, I guess, was that he had trouble with Seto and myself, who he lost to in both title matches for Rhinoa 3 and TTAC 8. But just phenomenal player. He also card selected his hands in tournaments, which I think is generally speaking a pretty clear handicap, and it just didn't seem to matter. But maybe he would have been even better with more serious hand construction. But just, I don't know. You think like when you saw him playing, he was usually playing either high level randoms, which he was phenomenal at, or like level 1 through 4 laning, right? Playing same plus wall combo. And he was really good at that, but it's a kind of dull rule set. And yet he came out of that with such a good feel for what the powerful cards are that he could put together these really, really solid, strong hands without needing to think them through, and cards that played together well. And just, oh, what a player. So then we have the noob Slash of Time. I say this because Slash started at a very similar time to when I did, and he was really bad. You know, he was one of those accounts with 100 wins and 1,000 losses. And he ended up making another account and going with that, and that ended up racking up pretty impressive records. But for a long time, it just like he was enthusiastic, he was having fun, and he did not get it. And then I don't know what happened, but suddenly like a switch went. And suddenly he was just this whole different player. And his kind of signature defensive style emerged. And he's actually one of the fastest players to achieve results. Like if you look at how many tournaments it takes people to win their first tournament or make their first finals or something like that, he's actually really quick. And so I probably over remember that noob period. But he was just playing so much and he was not playing well. And then something magical happened. And he became this really incredible player. If we talk about the previous stylistically, I think Kamikaze, a bit aggressive, Koner, a little more aggressive, great Sephiroth, I would tend to consider a pretty balanced player. Slash of Time found this very defensive style. You know, this very much, you play in one corner, I will play in the other. I will be ready to take myself back. I have hands built to recapture themselves. I'm going to use, 8-8 corners on level 7, right? And 8-8 corners are actually pretty good. I think I underrated them at the time. They're quite powerful cards. I was just so enamored with more dynamic cards like 8-7-6-4s. But Slash really made it work and had this really distinctive, clear style. There are some other players I think are very defensive, maybe a Kazakh that is sort of similar to him, but he was by far the most successful player with anything like this style. He ended up winning Rhinoa 4, Rhinoa 9, and Sephiroth. He's the second best player of 2009 when he won as many tournament matches as anyone ever won in a year, and it's probably a top 5 yearly performance ever. He was also the third best player of 2011. He ended up keeping it going basically till the end of the site, just a very strong player. He has really good records against a bunch of super top people. He's 3-1 against Delial and 2-2 against Yojimbo. There are only 2 players to ever have beaten Delial Yojimbo and was up in tournaments. He's one of them. And he has a plus record against that group, right? He's played all 3 of Delial, Yojimbo, and was up. He has a win against each, and he has a net positive record against the group. I don't think that's just not true for anyone else. Nightwish does not have a positive record against that group, and it's a really strong group to have done well against. Against the 5 GOAT contenders I've talked about in previous videos, he has the best record of anyone in the group we're talking about today, and the second best of anyone ever. I think it's close. I think Yojimbo's really close, but I think Slash comes out as the best Rhinoa performer ever. And it's kind of easy to be down on Rhinoa, but he also did really well in the title matches. I believe he defended against Delial once. I always forget who Slash and Nightwish defended against. I think Slash had a defense against Delial. Nightwish had a successful defense against Yojimbo. I didn't check that. I don't have as good Rhinoa records, and I get lazy about checking stuff. But it's also, Rhinoa, you play more games, right? You're playing both people on the other team in the team formats. Rhinoas are these tournaments where you're playing a lot of games, and we can count them less. But you could also argue they should not only be counted as much, but they're kind of a bigger sample. And Slash is the best Rhinoa player ever. And so I think he's kind of this wonderful journey from, like, a lot of the people who were good instantly, like, had this knack for the game. It clicked quickly for them, and, we got good. And for Slash, that wasn't the case. But he really spent a lot of time on it. He really enjoyed it. And something magical happened. And I still, to this day, don't know what it was. And if you want to find someone to, like, learn how to learn from, Slash is a great contender. Because, like, in life generally, we like to reward kind of, the talented kid rather than the one who works really hard. And I'm not saying Slash wasn't talented, but, like, he wasn't talented at this. and he got there anyway, and that's awesome. Like, that's tremendous. You know, part of the reason I stopped playing was because I stopped wanting to put in any work and I wanted to still have the results and I wasn't getting the results I wanted. So it was frustrating and I stopped, right? Where my talent wasn't enough to carry me without, some effort. And that was frustrating and not enjoyable for me. And so I have so much respect for the players who achieved what they did through work, through effort and time, and figuring out stuff to do that was different from what other people were doing. That's super cool. And he's a 3-time tournament winner. There's only 6. In order, Dalial was up, Seto, Great Sephiroth, Yojimbo, and Slash of Time. He's one of only 6 players to ever win 3 tournaments. His Sephiroth win, he beats Yojimbo in the finals. These are very impressive runs. So then we get the 2 Polish brothers, and I don't have as much about them because they're not covered near as much an occult fan, and I didn't know them well personally. So I have trouble saying quite as much about them. But Nightwish was the winner of Rhinoa 7 and Rhinoa 11 with multiple title defenses against very good players on the way. Again, I believe Yojimbo. He won a Clan Wars with T3, the same one with Great Sephiroth won, and as we'll see, MC was also on that team. Really good team T3 put up that year. He was the 3rd best player of 2009, 2010, and 2013. I think the only player other than Yojimbo and maybe Dalial to be a top 3 player in 3 different years. Just ridiculous performance. He's also one of only 2 players to get separately in the same year a quarterfinals, a semifinals, a finals, and a win, with his brother MC being the only other one to do so. I like to call that hitting for the cycle, because in baseball, if you hit a single, double, triple, and home run in the same game, that's called hitting the cycle. He's tied for the most finals of anyone in this group, having made 6 different finals. Slash also did it, but Nightwish did it in a lot fewer tournaments. He had a successful defense match against Yojimbo. Just like really, really good player for a 5-year stretch. Consistent performance. I think stylistically he veers not near as defensive as a Slash, but a little more on the defensive side, on the smooth side, on the all the cards fit together nicely. We're not overpowering as much as we're finding ways to get the rules to click for our captures. We're recapturing our own cards really well. So on a kind of stylistic spectrum so far, I'd have Koner the furthest on the aggressive side, then Kamikaze, then Great Sephiroth in the middle, then Nightwish a little on the defensive side, and then Slash way on the defensive side. Which is nice, because it's neat to get players that are stylistically a bit different. I might be wrong here. I didn't play a lot with Nightwish. We played in 2 finals and quarterfinals, but otherwise I didn't play much in just random games. So I don't have a great feel for it. But just these are all absurdly good players. The thing at the bottom right, I googled Nightwish, this band came up. Is that why he's named that? Almost certainly not, but I do graphics. I don't do graphics. That was a lie. All right, so then we have MC. The winner of Barrett, only 1 tournament. The only player here to win only 1 tournament, which may seem like he's not going to belong in this group. I think he very firmly does, and we'll see this. He won that Clan Wars with T3 we talked about. He won the Best Player of 2010, Best Player being my pick for Best Player of 2010. I believe he also won Player of the Year vote. He's the only player in this group to be the best player in a 2008 onwards era of new talent. Which I think was a very strong era, that 2008 to 2011 period, whenever I kind of try to rank years in terms of how competitive the top was, it's those 4 years, maybe 2012 and 13 as well. But it's those years that really pop out to me as this was really top-loaded with great players going head-to-head all the time. So he first went under the name Iktorn, and he was not super dominant under that name. He did have a quarterfinals, he did have some reasonable runs, but he wasn't, the superstar that he would become. And then he changed his name to MC and suddenly just crushed everyone and hit for the cycle, had a great year, 2-0 lifetime against Slash. And we're going to see as I get to some comparison stuff, which we're going to get to now, MC very much belongs in this group. Really tremendous player. The quote in the top right is from Vid. And yeah, so let's look at some comparisons. So here we have the 7 players I've put in this kind of second tier of players, not GOAT conversation, but the next tier of just phenomenal players. And we have Great Sephiroth, we have Nightwish, we have MC, we have Sujiro, who I already made a video about, but I'm putting in this group and I think should be compared here. We have Kamikaze, we have Slash, and we have Koner. And a few asterisks that I'm going to explain before I get into the rest. Slash and Koner have asterisks because when I made these numbers, it was just after I had stopped playing. And so it is not fully updated for after tournaments. And both Koner and Slash went on to win tournaments after I stopped updating these numbers. And that's also why there's question marks under the adjusted category, because I didn't get around to updating their numbers. I don't have them, and so these numbers underrepresent how incredible they were. The other thing that has an asterisk is the TP. TP is just tournaments played, so that you can look and see, oh, these players maintained it over a longer time or a lesser time, and maybe you think 15 tournaments, that's a pretty big sample. That's, 3 to 5 years of playing tournaments. That's, enough. But you might also think that playing 25 or 29 tournaments is just worth a lot more to have maintained these win rates for that long. So I wanted to make sure you could see the differences in how much players played. So, okay, to look at the chart, the first category is okay, meaning how did you do against players that were around average tournament performers or below? And you'll see everyone here absolutely crushed these players. Slash the least. Slash was the least consistent against this group, but Nightwish and Kamikaze are both like 15-0 or 10-0 or 20-0, somewhere in that range against this group of opponents. And basically players here were just not dropping games in real numbers to average and below players. And the next group we have is Strong, which is kind of between the okay players up to, 65% win rate opponents, which is basically almost everyone weaker than this group. And you can see again that the group puts up like 75, 80, 70, 67% win rates against this group, just really tremendous win rates. Elite is basically how did you do against each other and people better? How did you do against 65% plus players, which includes a few players a little below this group, but is basically this group and better. And you can see their win percentages there. Their overall is just what was your overall win percentage in tournaments, and your adjusted is some of you faced much stronger opposition than others. So if we adjust all your opposition to be consistent and to have been a more average distribution, what would your win percentage have been? And you'll notice those were higher. And that's because it's not a great adjustment, because assuming average opponents is just wrong, because it's an elimination format, not a round robin format. And so if on average you get an average opponent in the first round, well, a lot of the average players have been knocked out by the second round, and each round gets stronger and stronger. And these players who regularly went deep in tournaments are going to be facing significantly tougher than average opposition. And so the adjustment's probably not great because it overrates how well you do against the okay category specifically, and underrates how important it is to be really good for strong and elite opposition when you make the later rounds. So I don't love the adjusted category, but it does speak to Great Sephiroth and Nightwish, I think pretty clearly have the best win rates in this group. Kamikaze can compare on how well they did against okay players, but they're okay, they're strong, they're elite. And maybe MC is up there with a few more dropped games, mostly from early in his run as Ictorn, so you could easily write those off. But I think Great Sephiroth, Nightwish, and MC are pretty clearly the best kind of per-game performers of this group. But they also played the least tournaments. Sujiro up there, but a little behind. And then Kamikaze, Slash, and Koner, all really good per game, obviously, but not quite in the same group. But they played almost twice as long, right? And so to maintain, for Great Sephiroth to get to where Kamikaze is, for the next 11 tournaments, he'd still have had to play really well. And he didn't do that. He didn't play the next 11 tournaments. And so there's a question of, do you give credit to the person whose rate stat looks better, or to the person who maintained it for a lot longer? And I think that's a very open question. I guess another comment here is... I did have something else I thought was interesting to say here. So if you were to say, how would Great Sephiroth have had to do over his next 11 tournaments to end up with the same win rate as Koner? Or say, how much would Nightwish? Let's say Nightwish has played half the tournaments of Koner. What would his win percentages have to be to end up the same as Koner's? And so, for instance, he's 100% against OK, Koner's 86. So you might think, okay, that's a 14% difference. he'd have to do that far the other way. He'd have to be 72% okay. He's a 14% difference against strong, so he'd have to be a 50% the rest of the way. He's a 4% difference against elite, so he'd have to be 35% the rest of the way. Nightwish could easily do those things, so Nightwish's numbers look better. And I would say here Nightwish's numbers do definitely look better, but it's actually a little bit further ahead than it looks. Because the higher your win rate is, the more extra rounds you're playing, right? So if I go 3-1 twice and then 1-1 twice, right? In my 3-1 period, I'm a 75% player. In my 1-1 period, I'm a 50% player. And you might think those average to the midway point, 62.5%. But the 3-1 period, by virtue of winning, I got to play more games. So when you average those, you actually get 8 and 4, or 67%. Which is to say, the differences between higher win percentages and lower win percentages, even when saying you played less tournaments, are bigger than they first appear, because you've played more games in less time. So you may have only played 15 tournaments, but if your win rate is higher, it's really more like, if you've played 15 and they've played 29, it's really more like you've played 19 or 20 tournaments and they've played 29, because you've won more games, so you've advanced more rounds. So anyways, I think this chart, again, is very wide open. We have the players who played less, and during that time looked like they played at a higher level. And we have the players who played more and maintained really tremendous win rates too for longer. So then we have the records versus winners and versus each other. And so the first record stat is your record versus winners, and then I give you the win percentage of that. And again, you'll see Great Sephiroth and MC especially, but also Nightwish show up at the top here. Kamikaze moves up. Koner and Slash, not with the best rates versus winners overall, but if you divide it into subgroups, you notice some fun things, like Delial has that 3-2, Koner has that 3-2 versus Delial, Slash has that 3-1 versus Delial. These are players that were real. Obviously, everyone here is a huge threat, but it's sort of, you can go, oh, you're under 50%, you must be a below average winner. These are by no means below average winners. So we get their overall win percentage, and again, Great Sephiroth looking phenomenal. And then I gave the records versus each other, so that Great Sephiroth's 5-1 is versus the other players in this group. MC and Nightwish played a bunch, and I'm skeptical of the results, given that they tended to just be like, not play them. So I've excluded all MC versus Nightwish games. If you included them, their numbers would be slightly different, but I've just said, there was weird stuff going on, these were brothers, it's fine. Let's move on. So we can see Great Sephiroth and MC are the only ones to put up plus scores overall against the others in this group. And Slash had trouble against this group, but he did really well, as we saw, versus an even stronger group. So sometimes you just wonder, these are small samples, is this all variance? But overall, I think, again, this looks really good for the Great Sephiroth, MC, and Nightwish group. Anytime you're just looking at win percentage, they're going to look better. And anytime you're looking at total accomplishment, you're going to get more of Kamikaze, Koner, and Slash. So who's the best in different tournaments? Well, Kamikaze dominated TTAC, the site championship, and Sujiro and Great Sephiroth are in second and third. Interestingly, they met in a TTAC finals. But Kamikaze just way ahead of the pack here, one of the best win rates ever in TTAC. In Triad Wars, we see Nightwish ahead of MC and Koner. And you'll notice those are 3 completely different names in each category. Then in special edition tournaments, we have Great Sephiroth ahead of Nightwish and Kamikaze. And in Rhinoa, we have Slash with the highest win percentage ever in Rhinoa, because it's really hard to maintain high win percentages in Rhinoa. You never know who your teammate's going to be, who you're going to be, what kind of teams you're going to be paired against, ahead of Nightwish and Sujiro. So one thing I like about this list, I think everyone except MC? Okay, MC and Koner each show up once. Everyone else shows up at least twice here, which is kind of cool. Oh, no, Slash only shows up once, but he leads his category when he does show up. I think it's kind of cool just to see different names across different formats. Obviously, Triad Wars and Special Edition are very similar, but they have quite different lists here, and that probably speaks to random chance, but shh, let's pretend it says something important. So again, if you value one tournament more than others, this I think is a useful thing to say, oh, only Triad Wars matters, then I think Nightwish is the best. Or Rhinoa is really important and underrated, and we'll get to that in a sec. Oh, that reminds me of something from the past. We'll go back to that in a sec. Rhinoa is really important and underrated. I'm going to give extra credit to Slash. And that actually speaks to, if we go back to this chart, the win rates against different strength opposition, this is only from single-player tournaments. So this does not give specifically Slash, but also to some extent Nightwish, credit for their really good Rhinoa team tournament runs. That those two players should be even better than they look here. So okay. Then we have, what about speed to get to different results? Who, took fewer tournaments to achieve things? So Great Sephiroth and Slash are the only ones in the group to have made 3 championships. Great Sephiroth got there really quick. For 2 championships, Great Sephiroth's still the fastest, but before you go, okay, Slash made it to 3, but he took a long time, he's also the second fastest in this group to make it to 2 championships, somewhat faster than Nightwish. Slash was a really quick starter, despite me calling him a noob for a while. The fastest to 6 finals is Nightwish. Slash also achieved it. And the fastest to 4 finals is Nightwish, with Great Sephiroth second fastest, then Slash third fastest. For semifinals, Nightwish just racked them up, but Slash and Koner also got them pretty quick. For 4 semifinals, Koner got there fastest, followed by Great Sephiroth and Nightwish. For 15 icons, Koner got to 15. No one else in this group got close to that. 15 icons is an absurd number. That's almost as many tournaments as some of these players played. For 9 icons, Koner was the fastest, but Nightwish and MC also got there real quick. Despite MC's relatively slow start, he really hit a lot of quarterfinals finishes. And we got more. Who's the best at their peak? If we take a 3-tournament peak and look at your win percentage over that run and adjust for opponents, I come out with MC as the best peak, followed by Kamikaze and Great Sephiroth. For a 5-tournament run, MC, then Great Sephiroth, then Sujiro. For a 7-tournament run, MC, then Great Sephiroth, then Nightwish. And it takes a 9-tournament run to dethrone MC, with Great Sephiroth as the best peak, then MC, and then Koner, which you'd expect, because Koner kept putting up so many quarterfinals. So we have so many different ways of looking at this, and kind of each way leads to different stuff. And I think I've focused a little more on kind of fastest to or highest win rates. And so the numbers I've given are going to underrate your Kamikaze, your Koner, and your Slash. And you could easily say, okay, given that those guys were pretty close in a lot of these other categories and played almost twice as long, they're ahead. I think it's really up in the air. And then I have ELO ratings. So ELO ratings are used in chess. I think they're a pretty good rating system. They also do aggregate over time and can sometimes are a little too stuck in place, meaning it can be hard for someone in less time to catch up. So this is something which might give more credit to the players who played longer, but I don't think it does actually. So if we look at the highest peak ratings, we have Great Sephiroth and MC, then Kamikaze, Nightwish, Slash, Koner, and Sujiro, in that order. For the highest average rating, what rating did you maintain during your run? You may have peaked really high but then dropped off. We have Great Sephiroth, MC, Nightwish, Kamikaze, Koner, Sujiro, and Slash. For your final rating, now, does it really matter where you ended up? Sort of. It is kind of the total aggregation of what you were, but if you happen to end on a sour note or happen to end on a really good note, this is going to look good or bad for you. But that order goes MC, Nightwish, Great Sephiroth, Kamikaze, Koner, Slash, Sujiro. But then maybe more relevantly, because ratings inflated over time. They increased over time. You look at the top-rated player at different points in time, in chess, and this, and kind of anything ELO is applied to, and the rating range increases over time. And some people go, okay, but that sport or competition is also increasing in, skill. And so these ELO ratings are appropriate to that. But there's no reason to believe one is tied to the other. If that is happening, that is not why ratings are going up. They're going up because the pool is expanding, because as more people reach high ratings, you can beat other people with similar ratings, and you get more rating boosts the more you beat people close to you. So it's mostly pool expansion. And if it happens to go up at the same rate as improvement happens, that's great, but there's no reason to think it would or wouldn't. So instead of just looking at the numbers, what was your rating? Great Sephiroth looks great. We could instead say, what was your world rank? When Great Sephiroth was playing, the ratings were higher than when, Kamikaze was playing in 2006. When MC was playing in 2011 and 2012, the ratings were higher than when Great Sephiroth was peaking in the 2008 to 10 range. And so, maybe what matters is not the exact numbers, but what was your world rank? So, Kamikaze's peak rating was 2336. That was in 2010. That was not number 1 on the site. I don't know if that was top 3. But with a significantly lower rating in the 2200s, he was first in 2006. And Kamikaze and Sujiro are the only players here to have been rated best in the world. And neither were all that long, Kamikaze a little longer, but these are the only two players here to have been rated first in the world. But you might say, okay, they were rated first, and that's great, but Doc Evil had retired at that point, so he wasn't on the list. So they were competing with each other and Cookie and a few other great players. But when Great Sephiroth was second, he was competing with Yojimbo, Dalial, Seto, Was Up, etc., Koner, etc., and that's a much bigger achievement. So you could definitely argue it different ways. But I want to say Kamikaze and Sujiro were the only ones to ever be rated first. Great Sephiroth, Koner, and MC were all rated second. Nightwish peaked at third, and Slash peaked at fourth. But again, Nightwish and Slash had these tremendous Rhinoa results, and those are just underrated here. They're not included near what they should be. I just don't have the individual game results. So you could easily say, okay, they look like the bottom here, but this is underrepresenting the thing they were best at. So of course they're going to show a bottom here. And like, yeah. So again, just so hard to compare these players, I think. Some tremendous achievements. I think most people looking at them will be like, I found them tough to play, or I remember watching them and they were really impressive, and will kind of rank based on that. I like to be tied a little more to actual results than to kind of how did I feel first them. But if you look at the actual results, it's pretty hard to parse out. So if we look at overall accomplishments, I would say I think Koner has the greatest overall accomplishments, followed by Kamikaze, Slash, and Great Sephiroth. But if you value icons, that looks right. If you value winning tournaments, then Slash and Great Sephiroth won more tournaments, playing in general less or similar time. Great Sephiroth a lot less time. So if you value winning tournaments, Great Sephiroth won 15% of the tournaments he ever played. Like, Great Sephiroth's, the most accomplished here if our goal is just to win tournaments. But if our goal is to win icons, then Koner is, a top 3 or 4 player all time. Kamikaze is way, way up there. So I would say those four achieved more by clear amounts than the Polish brothers and then Sujiro did. Who has the highest win rates? I think it's pretty clearly Nightwish and Great Sephiroth. I think you could argue over who it is. I'd probably lean Great Sephiroth there, but just they won a lot of games. Who peaked the highest? I think that's pretty clearly MC and Great Sephiroth. Though you could argue for Slash there because his 2009 was so off the charts. So if you wanted like who peaked the most in a calendar year, I would say it was Slash, and then MC and Great Sephiroth. But if you wanted, who had the best 3 or 5 tournament run, it's pretty clear MC and Great Sephiroth had the best runs. Who did the best versus the best? Clearly Great Sephiroth, I think, his first year. We saw the win rate versus winners chart. MC is a pretty clear second. You could argue Slash, because while he's very bad against other people in this group, he's very good against the people even better than this group. So you could make a case for him, but I think it's probably Great Sephiroth or MC. Who got really good the fastest? Great Sephiroth, Slash, Koner, and Nightwish are here. But maybe I should say Kamikaze too. He got 3 icons in his first 3 tournaments, and he wasn't getting further than that for a bit until 2005, a couple years later. But he was very good very quick. That's arguably the fastest start anyone had. But it's not quite reaching total dominance that all of these players at some point achieved. And what do the ratings say? Well, Kamikaze and Sujiro were the only ones rated top in the world, but, Great Sephiroth, MC, Nightwish have higher ratings. And you can also say that Slash and Nightwish are underrated by this because it doesn't include all the Rhinoa results, and they won a lot of those games. So, it's a mess. I'm going to get to what my ranking is. I'm sure you disagree. I'm sure in a different mood I look different, but let's see what I put in yesterday. No, we're not quite there yet. So I think Great Sephiroth is just clearly the best in this group. I think if you look at all these things, he's so consistent. His name just shows up so frequently and so frequently at the top of this group. And I think when you start comparing him to the GOAT contenders, he's really in the conversation. I just couldn't find a specific case for him, right? If you want, someone who played 15, 20 tournaments and won a lot of tournaments, well, Was Up comes out better. You want, total accomplishment. Yojimbo, Dalial, and Seto come out better. You look at the head-to-heads, and Great Sephiroth is great against Yojimbo, but he had problems against Seto and Was Up. You look at really short-term peaks, and all of them come out a little better than him. So I think Great Sephiroth, you could argue him as top 5. I think you could look at the 5 that are in this GOAT conversation and say, I don't really believe in the case for one of them. Great Sephiroth should be ahead of them. I think that's legit. You could even maybe make a case for him at fourth, though probably not. So, great Sephiroth, borderline top five. I think clearly the best in this group. I think if you don't have him fifth or sixth all time, your rankings are wrong and bad, and you should feel great shame. And I think he's the best of this group, and I think that's not, shouldn't really be contended. I hope you can't hear the rain. We're starting to storm in here. After that, I don't know. Nightwish and MC have these fantastic per tournament numbers, but it's really hard to pick between them. They have different strengths. I didn't talk about style so much with MC, but MC I would put more on the aggressive end of the spectrum, and Nightwish is on the defensive. So their styles are different. Where they impress is different. Nightwish with these really consistent record results. MC with this lower lows, higher peak, better head-to-heads against top players. They have really different strengths, and they're really close, and you could order them either way. And then we have Koner, Kamikaze, and Slash, who all have just more total success than the above group, except maybe Great Sephiroth, but we're excluding him for the moment because he is the best of this group. You know, Koner with his incredible icon rate, just so many icons, and so good. We have Kamikaze, who did so much for the site, won one of the most impressive tournament wins ever. Did it different amounts, like substantially separated moments. 2005 and 2010 as his two peaks is really far apart, and that he was really good in between, that he led clans so well. And then Slash, who did it in the later years, so I think a lot of early people will kind of write off what he did. But I think you can easily argue he's doing it against tougher opposition. He's doing it, taking games off Yojimbo, which the others aren't really doing. He's doing it taking games off me, taking games off a bunch of other people. And he's also doing it in a way that these numbers are going to underrate because he had so much Rhinoa success. So I think those three are really hard to order too. And Slash won more tournaments than the others. But if you discount Rhinoas, then, Kamikaze won the most tournaments of them. If you want icons, Koner has the most. And Kazi has just a ton of everything. So I'm going to try to rank them. I'm going to say Great Sephiroth got to be the top of the group. But the rest, you could argue lots of different ways. And this is just what I put in last night. I don't actually remember what I put in. So excited to find out. Okay. So Great Sephiroth, sixth all time. You could argue him fifth or fourth. Then we have MC and Nightwish. I guess I leaned MC for his high peak and his head-to-head ratings. But you could put MC and Nightwish like 10th and 11th, right? You could say, I value the achievement over the high peak, and I think Koner, Kamikaze, and Slash are ahead of them. And you could easily have them 10th, 11th. This group is very arguable. I guess I valued Koner's longevity and just really consistent results over Kamikaze's higher peak and Slash's Rhinoa results, which again, this all underrates. Like, Slash should look at this list and be like, bullshit, You're just underrating all the things I did good, and I'm still 11th all time. I could easily be higher, right? Everyone from 7th to 11th has a good case to be 7th, I think. And this was the way it broke down in my head, but tomorrow it's going to break down differently. And I think Sujiro's 12th. And I think there's sort of like Great Sephiroth is clearly the leader of the group. And I think Sujiro is pretty clearly, a phenomenal 12th best all time, but the lower end of this group, right? He won one tournament, really impressive run, a 7-rounder, the best 7-rounder ever. I talked about him more in his video. I think he deserves to be in this group, but I think it's hard to make a case for him ahead of the other guys. So did I ignore some deserving players? And I talked about this a little with Sujiro and Great Sephiroth, that I think Great Sephiroth is the best of this group, and Sujiro, I think, is the weakest of this group, though by no means not a phenomenal player. But if Sujiro is a little weaker than the others, does that mean there are other players I should have included with him? Or that I should have booted him from the group? And I don't think so. I think there are like somewhere between 5 and 10 players who I could make some kind of argument for. I don't want to really spoil who that is because I intend to make a video. I think the most obvious of them is Cookie, who was just so good from 2004 to 2006. And his rate numbers are not great because he did not keep it up. But should that really matter? Like, should it be if you, didn't care so much and played and were okay for a long time? Does that hurt that you were one of the best ever from 2004 to 2006? And I think he has a pretty good case. And I think there are a bunch of other players that have a good case. There are There's multiple people who won 2 tournaments I haven't included, and I included some people that won 1 tournament. There are some 1 tournament winners that did a lot of other achievements that you could argue deserve to be here. I think there's a clear drop off after Sujiro, having looked at lots of different numbers. I think Sujiro is just very clearly 12th, but there are a bunch of people in with cases. There are short-termers who peaked just incredibly high in their short runs. There are long-term players who aggregated more. You can probably guess who's in the conversation for the next slots. There are players who are early in Triple Triad's run and late. This list tended to be players who are kind of in that middle-late period, but the list of people who have a case to be here are a lot more varied in what era they come from. There are some that came later, and there are some that came a lot earlier too. So that's my list of the 6th through 12th of all time. I'm curious who people think I underrated. Should Koner be higher? Should Koner be 7th? Right? Should Kamikaze be higher? Should Slash be higher? Should Sujiro be higher? Did I get the MC Nightwish ordering correct? I don't know. I have no idea. These are all tremendously good players. They're all kind of similar in that they basically won between 70 and 75% of their tournament games. They all played at least 15 tournaments. They're all tournament winners. They all have pretty great records against other really good players. They slaughtered average and weaker players. It's a really strong and quite balanced group. And I'm curious what other people think about them. I think it's a very strong group. I think Great Sephiroth is the cream of the crop here, and I kind of wish he had played longer so we had a bigger sample with him. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. I went on a bit longer than I wanted to, but cheers.